Go.
Good morning and welcome to this live stream worship from the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Sheridan, Wyoming. My name is Victor Asher and I am the worship chair of this fellowship. And with me this morning assisting with the worship are Ian Wallace and Grace Cannon. And it's great to have you with us helping this morning. And thanks to all of you for being here. And I will give you an opportunity to bring forward your announcements either through the chat or else you can or you can text actually Ian Wallace, Ian.T.Wallace. No, that's not it. That's his Gmail account.
Oh, yeah.
How do we, well, they have to, they can do that. They can, no, they can't do that.
You can send me an email at ian.t.wallace53@gmail.com. That always works. Or you can feel free to send me a text message at 307-461-7403.
And while we're waiting for other announcements to come in, I'll mention a couple. First, I'd like to remind folks that after the virtual service, you'll have an opportunity to engage in fellowship with the Zoom platform. And at the bottom of the order of service that I sent out, you will see a link for that. And that'll occur right after the service. Another announcement that I'd like to make is that those of you that are interested in meditation, you're welcome to come to an outdoor meditation in my backyard, hopefully using safe social distancing, and we'll begin at 4:30. My address is 1433 Stonegate Drive, and just come around to the backyard if you want to participate in meditation. And we'll see if there now are other announcements.
Nothing so far. Nothing coming in. It looks like we've got lots of people saying good morning everyone, and no further announcements. If you do need to send them in, we can make sure to circle back and make announcements towards the end.
And also you can begin to send your joys or concerns. We'll have that in a little bit. But for now, we are continuing with our theme for June, which is transcendence. And we're building on a service that Cal Furnish gave us last Sunday when he talked about transcendence occurring in small moments. And we're going to elaborate a little further on that idea. And the other point I wanted to make at the outset is that the theme of transcendence is really connected to the theme of mystery that we covered last month. It's also tied to surrender, letting go that we covered a couple of months back. And in my opinion, it's also tied to grace. So all of these things are just kind of looking at the elephant from different points of view, so to speak. So I have some opening words. They are from the Reverend Carol Mayer, and it's called Eternal Mystery. May we open ourselves ever more fully to that eternal mystery which lures us onward toward life and creativity. May we find the courage to live our faith, to speak our truth, to strive together for a world where freedom abounds and justice truly does roll down like water. May we know the fullness of love without fear and the serenity of peace without turmoil. May we hold one another in the deep and tender places with compassion, and may we grace one another by sharing our vulnerabilities and being ever mindful of the divinity that makes soulmates of us all. And now we'll have some morning music, courtesy of, what's that fellow's name?
Peter Mayer.
Peter Mayer, thank you, who happened to write the words to Blue Boat Home, one of our favorite hymns. Anyway, please enjoy this morning music.
There are 100 billion snowflakes swirling in the cosmic storm, and each one is a galaxy, a billion stars or more, and each star is a million Earths, a giant fiery sun, high up in some sky, maybe shining on someone. Deep inside a snowflake I am floating quietly. I am infinitesimal, impossible to see. Sitting in my tiny kitchen, in my tiny home, staring out my window at a universe of snow. But my soul is so much bigger than the very tiny me. Reaches out into the snowstorm like a net into the sea. Out to all the lovely places where my body cannot go. I touch that beauty and embrace it in the bosom of my soul. And so brief and fleeting is this tiny life of mine, like a single quarter note in the march of time. But my soul is like the music, it goes back to ancient days, back before it wore a human face, long before it bore my name. Because my soul is so much older than the evanescent me. It can describe the dawn of time like a childhood memory. It is a spark that was begotten of the darkness long ago. What my body has forgotten, I remember in my soul. This life together, my giant soul and tiny me, one resembling forever, one like smoke upon the breeze, one the deep abiding ocean, one a sudden flashing wave, and counting galaxies like snowflakes, I would swear we were the same. Oh, my soul belongs to beauty, takes me up to lofty heights, teaches sacred stories to me, sanctifies my tiny life, lays a bridge across the ages, melts the boundaries of my bones, paints a bold eternal face on this passing moment. Oh, my soul.
Okay.
All right, welcome back. So we're moving into the chalice lighting. So I will read as Victor lights. This is Spirit of Life, Mysterious Power in All Creation by Reverend Andrew C. Bacchus. Spirit of life, mysterious power in all creation, we stand before you now as countless others have stood asking that you make yourself known to us. Let us find you in the glories and wonders of the world and in moments of great joy and ecstasy. But most of all, let us find you in the commonplace and that which we touch every day. Let us find you in the familiar and those whom we touch every day. Let us find you in ourselves at the center of our being. Teach us in the careless, casual moments when we do not ask to be taught, and let us know that we are indeed part of the great mystery of creation.
Chalice doesn't want to light.
Oh, we have
chalice issues.
Chalice issues.
Try and say it.
It's just the great mystery at work. So that we have a couple coming in already this morning. So Catherine Johnson, please light a candle for my son, Nathan, and fiance, Chelsea, for having to give up their dream wedding and figuring out how to realistically get married and celebrate with COVID concerns. And then also coming in from Sue Roberts, she has a joy for all the high school graduates this weekend. Very exciting. And there might still be some more that come in. I'll offer, if you'll light a candle, it's kind of a joy and a concern. There's lots of change in my life, and so embracing that, which is very exciting, and releasing that, which can be stressful. So,
and I will light a candle for my son Jeff, who's undergone a really dramatic transformation over the last year and a half. It's gone from having a life of isolation and not sure what his direction was, and without a relationship. And now he has a wife and a child and the prospects of a wonderful job. He just finished some training as a computer programmer, and he did very well with that, and he's looking forward to a brand new career. So I will light a candle for my son and for transformation.
Beautiful. And if there are any other joys and concerns, we'll wait just another moment in case I'm not seeing them here.
I'll offer a joy and a concern for the heat. It's like really wonderful that I have like cold hands and feet all through all the year. So when the summer heat finally comes, I'm always really glad. But the fact that it's, above 90 in June is also a little disconcerting here. So
yeah. Okay.
So one final candle then?
Yes, one final candle for any joys and concerns left unspoken or unshared.
Oh, I got one.
Do you have some?
That just came in.
Sure.
Bill would like us to light a couple candles. A joy for all the wonderful people in his life. And he'd also like us to light a candle for his friend Steve. And he's made progress in his recovery so far. So that's good to hear. Thank you, Bill.
And then I'll just offer it. One last one, too, came in here from Catherine Johnson. Joy and concern for peaceful protests and for George Floyd's family. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Grace. And Ian, would you come up and read us a story for all ages? And it's that guy right there.
Okay. We have a short little story here titled The Great Hooray. The children of classes 1 and 2 were assembled in the hall, waiting for the class to begin. The visiting poet was with them this morning, and they were all agog with excitement. They always enjoyed his visits, but class 3 was late. The children were getting impatient. The poet looked around at their eager faces. An unnatural quiet descended, as they seemed almost to be holding their breath in anticipation. "You're so quiet today," he smiled at them. "Let's see if you can make a noise. Let's all shout, 'Hooray!'" So a shout went up. "Hooray!" "That's splendid," he beamed. "Now, when class 3 arrives, let's play a game with them. Let's all be as quiet as mice. And when they're all in their places, we'll all shout a huge hooray to greet them. We'll see if we can raise the roof. Agreed?" The children were thrilled at the idea, and they became quiet again, and you could have heard a pin drop. Class 3 came into the hall. They were sorry they were late. They sat down quietly, and then, on a signal from the poet, "Hooray!" The great hooray resounded through the hall, through the school, through the whole village, and oh, imagine, the roof flew off. Off it flew, leaving the blue sky open above the children's heads. Off it flew over the gardens and houses, the streets and the trees. And as it went, it dropped hoorays off all over the town. Mums doing their washing suddenly froze to find a hooray in their kitchen. Dogs fast asleep in their corners were awoken by the happy sounds trickling down from the sky as the roof flew past. Through keyholes, windows, and open doors, the hoorays crept into every home. Whispers and echoes of joy covered the whole community with morning mystery. Hearts fluttered and lifted at the happy sound. And the roof flew on, carrying echoes of joy through the world and bringing the rafters of homes throughout the land into resonance. Later in the night, the rain came, and every raindrop picked up the sound of the great hooray. And the next morning, the mist that covered the hills and valleys was impregnated with the same cry of joy. It trickled away into the streams and rivers. It crept up the stalk of every flower and nestled in the feathers of every bird. Hooray, hooray, hooray. As the weeks passed by, the gentle waves lapped against a distant seashore, and the close-curled shells, if you listened closely, recalled that first hooray. Years later, the poet smiled as if the echoes of the first hooray were gently touching his face again in a passing breeze. And he knew another poet, the poet whose first joyous hooray had soaked into everything that is. He knew that his own poems were a tiny echo of that great poem of creation, and he laughed out loud at the mystery of it all. And his laughter bubbled off and away to gurgle forever through the universe.
You never know how far your shouts of joy will go. So now we'll turn to a time of meditation. I have a reading for us, and it's by Emerson. After the reading, we'll have a moment of silence to be followed by singing Spirit of Life. So the reading is from The Oversoul by Ralph Waldo Emerson. Let us learn the revelation of all nature and thought, that the highest dwells within us. that the sources of nature are in our own minds. As there is no screen or ceiling between our heads and the infinite heavens, so there is no bar or wall in the soul where we, the effect, cease and God, the cause, begins. I am constrained every moment to acknowledge a higher origin for events than the will I call mine. There is a deep power in which we exist and whose beatitude is accessible to us. Every moment when the individual feels invaded by it is memorable. It comes to the lowly and simple. It comes to whoever will put off what is foreign and proud. It comes as insight. It comes as serenity and grandeur. The soul's health consists in the fullness of its reception. Forever and ever, the influx of this better and more universal self is new and unsearchable. Within us is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty to which every part and particle is equally related, the eternal one. When it breaks through our intellect, it is genius. When it breathes through our will, it is virtue. When it flows through our affections, it is love. So my words this morning, they're not mine. They come from a sermon called In Search of the Transient, and it was written by the Reverend Terry Sims, who is now at the First Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Surprise, Arizona. Has anybody heard of Surprise, Arizona? Okay. I was surprised, but before that, he was at the UU Church in Phoenix, and that's where he delivered this sermon. You will learn more about this man from the talk itself, so you'll pick up some biographical stuff from it. Before I get into the talk, I just wanted to give this little prelude. Why are these moments of transcendence? Why do they matter? Why are they important? Well, I believe, and I think Reverend Sims agrees, that when we feel that connection with the universal, when we have that heartfelt experience, it forms a foundation, I think, for our faith. As an example, if you think about our first principle, the what is it? I'm sorry. The inherent worth and dignity of every person, or even our seventh principle, respect for the interdependent web. If you have a feeling of connection, it's easier and it makes more sense to feel that sense of inherent worth or to feel that connection to the universal. And so it makes you want to work for justice. It makes you want to work for the environment. So it's not just that you have a rational sense of this is right, this is what we need to do, this makes sense, this is ethical. It also, there's a feeling with it. And I think that's why these moments of transcendence are so important, and why we are actually covering it this month. So with that prelude, I will now read the words of Reverend Sims. There is a classic debate in theological circles about whether God is out there by God's self or with us in here in our existence. Of course, it's a theist debate among people who believe that God is and therefore must be somewhere. On the other side of this debate, there's another term called immanence. People who hold that God is immanent believe that God remains within God's universe and our experience. In other words, God is in here with humanity and with the rest of God's creation. Those who believe that God is out there believe that God is utterly above or outside the universe and outside of time. In other words, God is beyond what we can know or understand directly. The theological term for this idea is transcendence, and it is connected with the theology called deism. And some of you may remember that Robert Tilden gave us a really nice talk about deism a number of years ago. Some of our founding fathers were deists. Deism doesn't get a lot of traction these days, but there are still probably people who hold to that. So besides that idea that God being transcendent is out there, away from the universe, as the deists thought, there's another meaning to the term transcendence, and that meaning just is that to rise above or go beyond, to exceed or surpass. So we have a little confusion here. But we're talking about transcendence not sort of being this idea of deism, but just the idea that we go above our daily experience to experience something more profound and more meaningful. That's the sense of the term that we're going to be using this morning and for the rest of the month. So the second meaning of the term transcendence, to rise above, that gave rise to the transcendentalist movement, that gave the transcendentalist movement its name. Transcendentalism was a literary, philosophical, and theological movement that flourished in New England from about 1836 to 1860. Some of you may have seen the movie Little Women, based on the novel by Louisa May Alcott, who was, in fact, a transcendentalist. And some of her political views and some of her theology was actually expressed in that, because she was really embodying, I think, the beginnings of the women's liberation movement. So this movement called Transcendentalism brought about one of the critical expansions of Unitarian theology. The Transcendentalists tried to transcend or go beyond the doctrines, definitions, and categories that they felt limited one's own direct experience of the divine. Unitarian historian David Walker Howe tells us that they were reacting against both the orthodoxy of Calvinism and the rationalism of the traditional Unitarian church of that era. Emerson famously complained that insistence on intellectual control of the emotions had left the standard Unitarianism of his day, in his words, corpse cold. Rather than rely either on Calvinism or traditional Unitarianism, the Transcendentalists developed their own faith that centered on the divinity of man and nature. Confusingly for us, the Transcendentalists did not believe that God was transcendent or out there. Instead, God, for them, was immanent in here. Howe explains. Essentially, the Transcendentalists were pantheists. Remember that idea of pantheism? God is nature. They saw and felt God everywhere in all creation, especially in themselves. They believed that God was present and could be felt in individual intuition and was therefore the highest source of knowledge. The Transcendentalists felt and wrote passionately about intuiting the divine presence within themselves. They took that personal intuition as proof of God's existence. Emerson wrote, and here's a quotation from Emerson, "I am part or parcel of God. Man is an infinite soul. The earth and the heavens are passing into his mind. He is drinking forever the soul of God. Let me admonish you to go alone and dare to love God without mediator or veil. That unity, that oversoul, that overpowering reality in us become wisdom and virtue and power and beauty. Within man is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty, the eternal one." Emerson talked about God in us, but what I hear most is his passion for the moments that rise from and take us beyond the ordinary human experience. Although I don't know of any transcendentalist who talked about it in quite this way, what I hear in their writings is wonder and worship of the transcendental moment, the transcendental experience. A few weeks ago, on a Friday, I had a long, dull, and trying day. I found absolutely nothing special or elevating about it. I was at my law firm that day, working on a project that did not interest me. The lawyer on the other side had been unreasonable and unnecessarily aggressive in disagreeing with me. But I had a string quartet practice that evening that I had been looking forward to. I was glad to get there and start rehearsing. Sometime while we were playing Bach's Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring, I just felt different. The day I had until then fell away from me. The quartet was playing well, and I was right together and was right together. I was focused on the music rather than just on playing my part, and I relaxed into the gorgeous, soul-filling music. I became part of it. It became part of me. It saved my day. It was magical, elevating, spiritual. It was that sort of mystical higher experience that Wordsworth was describing in his poems. And I'm about to read a quote from Wordsworth, and he uses the word disturbs, but this is 2 centuries ago, so when he's talking about disturbs, he doesn't mean that it really bothered him. It just means that it impacted him, right? All right, so here's the quote. And I have felt a presence that disturbs me with the joy of elevated thoughts, a sense sublime of something far more deeply infused, whose dwelling is the light of setting suns and the round ocean and the living air. My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. So do you sense there a transcendent moment? Me standing at the seashore at sunset with a rainbow? Yeah. The transcendentalist's emphasis on personal experience of the divine was not lost on their critics. The critics rejected the transcendentalist's pantheism, which found God in everything. But according to Howe, they attacked transcendentalism for substituting personal inspiration for the revelation contained in the Bible. How dare they do that? Emerson's writings confirm the traditionalist concerns. He wrote, "More and more the surges of everlasting nature enter into me. We distinguish the announcements of the soul by the term revelation. These are always attended by the emotion of the sublime. Every moment when the individual feels himself invaded by it is memorable. A certain enthusiasm attends the individual's consciousness of that divine presence. A certain tendency to insanity has always attended the opening of the religious sense in people, as if they had been blasted with an excess of light. The trances of Socrates, the conversion of Paul, the convulsions of George Fox and his Quakers are of this kind." End quote. Unitarian historian Howe has written that after Emerson delivered his divinity school address at Harvard, his traditionalist colleague, Henry Ware Jr., wasted no time. Ware soon delivered a sermon to the divinity students entitled "The Personality of the Deity." He did not mention Emerson by name, but Ware was unmistakably referring to Emerson's recent address when he declared that God must not be equated with the universe he had created, nor with abstractions like beauty and virtue. Either God was a personality who took a personal interest in each of us, or else the whole of religion was a waste of time. Emerson's position, divested of its lyrical rhetoric, came down to atheism, he concluded. So much for Emerson. Now we're back to Sims talking about an experience. I remember walking home from a seminary class one bright, cool day. I don't know what triggered, what happened, what caused me to feel the way I felt. But it had something to do with enjoying the day and the natural beauty around me, the deep conversation in class, and the realization that there was nowhere else I would rather have been and nothing else I would rather have been doing. Before that day, I had been struggling with my Midler Review. The Midler Review is a major paper which halfway through seminary training, the seminarian is to articulate his or her theology. I had been distressed that I could find no clear statement of a Unitarian Universalist theology that was both rigorous and meaningful to me. But that day, I finally realized a core concept that had informed my feeling about life and my understanding of what was sacred. It was a breakthrough for me, one I have never forgotten, and that forms the basis of my theology today. I understood, felt the sacredness of life and the elevated human experience of life. I'm reminded here, some of you know the idea of reverence for life that Albert Schweitzer promoted. It seems very, very tied to that. There are other times when I have experienced insight, just a fleeting glimpse of a more complete understanding of clarity, of beauty, things make sense to me in a way that they never have before. Those are some of the moments when I have had a direct experience of something I can only describe as transcendence. My life becomes more special, more worthwhile. It is as if I have been raised to a higher plane of existence, or at least an expanded experience of my existence. Often it has to do with my connection to other people and to the world. I feel enlarged. It is as if I grasped, at least for a moment, what life is really about, what it means, what it is worth. I suddenly feel in that moment that I can be more understanding, more courageous, more forgiving, more loving. It is as if my individual self, my ego, has melted away and become part of the great web of existence. And there's that surrender idea, y'all. What I have felt essentially, I think, what Emerson and Wordsworth and others described. It is the feeling of going beyond the mundane, the ordinary things of the world. Virgil Bradley, my Methodist minister when I was in high school, used to talk about mountaintop experiences. The fact that Emerson associated that feeling with God, with a divine presence, is not that different than what I had felt. What I have felt is as close to what I expect to come to the divine. I am not interested in searching for a transcendent being. I thirst for transcendent moments. So it's not about a creator, it's about creation. What I have felt is essentially, I think, what Emerson and Wordsworth and others described. It is the feeling of going beyond the mundane, the ordinary things of this world. Virgil Bradley, my Methodist minister when I was in high school, used to talk, I'm sorry, I read that already. The transcendent moment, that's what religion should celebrate. I don't agree with Ware's declaration that God must not be equated with the universe, nor with abstractions like beauty and virtue. Indeed, if God is not found there, where else can we look? Religion is not a waste of time if all we have is a feeling of divinity rather than God as a personality. I think some of us are too often distracted by trying to sort out whether God is here or there or even exists. I think we are distracted from the simple feeling of awe, of wonder that bears us upward and outward. I would describe myself as one who believes emotion should be checked by reason. But it's not all about rationality. When we come to church, however, However much we enjoy thinking carefully, we should remind ourselves that there's something powerful to feel too. The primary question for some of us today is simply whether there is something transcendent in human experience. Is there anything that ennobles or enriches everyday human life? If not, what's the use? What's the point of life without moments of greater understanding or compassion or joy? Another lawyer in my firm observed years ago that I just wanted to believe there was something beyond the ordinary. He suggested that I wanted to believe that enough that perhaps I had invented the transcendent moments about which I had rhapsodized, just as he believed other people invented God. It is hard to talk about the transcendent, the ineffable, what is unseen and unfelt by others. Transcendent things cannot be proved. They require faith in ourselves and our experience. And to believe in others' transcendent moments asks us to trust others and their experience. All I can say is that I have lived moments in which I felt myself more than I was before. Those sublime moments, that feeling of elevation, of surpassing our usual experience, is perhaps what makes the rest of life bearable and one hope we most need, and the one hope we most need. But how do we find them? Speaking of the more emotional experiences in some religious expressions, Emerson wrote, "What was in the case of these remarkable persons' ravishments has, in innumerable instances in common life, has been exhibited in less striking manner. Everywhere the history of religion betrays a tendency to enthusiasm. The rapture of the Moravian and the Quietist," I looked those up, those are just antiquated versions of Protestantism. "The revival of the Calvinist churches, the experiences of the Methodists, these are varying forms of that shudder of awe and delight with which the individual soul always mingles with the universal soul." End quote. Emerson reminds us that there are more elevated moments of the soul available to us than we might think, innumerable instances in common life. I'm reminded of what Cal was talking about just last week. I was driving by the park close to my house one morning a few weeks ago. Two boys, about 7 and 4, I guessed, were playing with a bright yellow balloon. They were alone at the edge of the park next to the street. Somehow the balloon got away from them and started to drift across the street. It must not have been fully inflated because it settled against the curb on the other side of the street. I am sure I saw the boys start toward the street and then wisely remember someone's admonition that they could not cross the street by themselves. The driver of the car ahead of me must have noticed all that too. He drove into the parking area just past where the boys were and stopped his car. Then he checked for traffic, ran across the street, retrieved the yellow balloon, and gave it back to the boys. The 7-year-old thanked him. Then he and his brother turned and ran down the hill with their balloon. Watching that small act of kindness caused my heart to leap. I am often surprised to realize that I continually wander through my life as if beauty and truth and goodness were not all around me. I'm reminded of the Navajo saying in our hymnal, "Beauty is before me, beauty behind me. Above and below me hovers the beautiful. I am surrounded by it. I am immersed in it. In my youth, I am aware of it. In my old age, I shall walk quietly the beautiful trail. In beauty it is begun, in beauty it is ended. Emerson wrote that people will come to see that the universe is represented in the atom in a moment of time. That sounds very similar to William Blake's poem, To See the World. To see the world in a grain of sand, and heaven in a wild flower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand, and eternity in an hour. Transcendent moments happen everywhere, but not all the time. That's what makes them transcendent rather than mundane. But I think we could be more intentional about being open to them, about paying attention to them. A walk in the garden, hearing a favorite piece of music, witnessing or doing an act of kindness, someone else's joy, a quiet sunset, the embrace of someone you love. Whether a moment is ordinary or extraordinary may have more to say about our response to it than it does about the moment itself. I hope we will remember that we are surrounded by beauty, immersed in it. I wish for us many transcendent moments that make life wonderful and irreplaceable, despite the commonplace, the sad, or even the tragic moments. May we all find such transcendent moments everywhere and often, including in our brothers and sisters. Stay open to the transcendent moments. Watch for them and drink them in deeply when they happen. See heaven in a flower and hold infinity in the palm of your hand. Blessed be. And now, if you will join, we will sing together one of our favorite UU hymns called Morning Has Broken, which I think describes a moment of transcendence.
Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for the springing, fresh from the world. Sweet the rain's new fall, sunlit from heaven, like the first dew fall on the first grass. Praise for the sweetness of the wet garden, sprung in completeness where his feet pass. Mine is the sunlight, mine is
imagine that the basket is being passed around the room. And let's take a moment to bless the offering together. Let this be an offering to sustain and strengthen this place, which is so sacred to many of us, a community of memory and hope, for we are the keepers of the dream. And please make your checks payable to the UU Fellowship of Sheridan and send them to Ramona Stein at the address listed in your order of service. Or if you prefer, you can make a contribution through our website, and you can just click on the link there. And we do thank you for your contributions. And now some closing words. A poem by Mary Oliver called The Summer Day. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean, the one who has flung herself out to the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. She lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me what else I should have done. Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it that you plan to do with your own one wild and precious life? And with that, we will open the channels of communication that we have available to us for discussion.
Thank you so much, Victor, for that wonderful talk today. And I love that final thought too in the Mary Oliver poem. So I love the reminder that transcendence is, there's beauty all around us, and remembering that in Mary Oliver, just talking about paying attention, taking, we can't control other things, but we can pay attention. We can find that beauty. And Holly Hogarty says, hooray for Ian, Grace, and Victor. Thank you so far.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So
Thanks for you too, Holly.
Yeah. Well, Victor, you and I did a little bit of a
Switching?
a swap.
A swap. We did a swap.
We swapped weeks, and the reason initially was the thought was I had been scheduled for this week, and Grace hadn't been planning to be back yet at this point. So we thought, well, oh, poor Ian.
He can't do it all by himself,
He's
poor
going to
fellow.
be all alone, and although I said I might be able to do it all by myself, it might be a little awkward. So you and I agreed to switch, and then it's nice that Grace is back, but that's initially why we switched. But that implied, though, that I had more time to write my own piece for next week, and you didn't have enough time to write a piece yourself, so you chose this. But I was wondering, was there any constellation of ideas or particularity that you had in mind that wasn't the exact thrust of this talk?
Actually, none.
Okay.
I really wish that I had written this, because it said it better than I could possibly have said it. I am a fan of transcendentalism. It's no surprise. That really is just as Reverend Sims was saying, the core of his faith. When he was struggling for his Midler paper, what was going to be his attachment to Unitarian Universalism as a theology. what was going to be the core of his essay, I guess we could call it. The guy is, he just, I can't say it any better than him. I feel exactly the way he does about it. I'll tell you somebody else who feels the same way. It's Ron Smith, who turned me on to transcendentalism and to Emerson. So yeah, I thank you, Ron, for introducing me to what has become my core spirituality.
So I have kind of like a follow-up question.
Yeah, sure.
To that then. I love transcendentalism. I think it's very inspiring, and I don't give any truck to the the theological bastion, which was constructed against the threat of pantheism and
Right.
transcendentalism.
Right.
But I have a criticism of it that.
How dare you?
Yeah, I know. Perhaps it's a little bit romantic, and when the basis of this religious aspiration is strictly these moments of going beyond the ordinary experience.
Yes.
How does that hold water in the face of deep trauma and say in the face of evil?
Wonderful question. And so I think, and I can't speak for transcendentalism as a whole, but as a person who feels affinity with transcendentalism, I think it's the basis of faith. You when you feel moments of transcendence, you have a sense of faith in the world, in the future, in life as a whole. And even though there's evil in the world, there's this sense of goodness, right, is what carries you through the bad. And so, like right now, we are dealing with a terrible bad, right? We've seen Black people killed by police. It's horrible. So what would a transcendentalist might have to say about that? Well, they might say, first of all, that because we feel an affinity and a connection to other human beings, we are deeply hurt by it. We are saddened. We are enraged, but we are also hopeful that we will rise above this. That somehow the life will go on. That beauty and goodness will prevail, and that comes not only from a feeling of connection, but also of experience, that the arc of the universe bends towards justice. By the way, do you know that the arc, that phrase, where that comes from? Martin Luther King quoted it, but where did he get it from?
Emerson?
No, but Parker, who was a colleague, he was a Unitarian minister. Yeah, he's the one that. But it really goes back to the prophet Amos. He was paraphrasing, but the actual words come from Theodore Parker, a Unitarian. I hope that is a partial answer. Do you want to say more about it?
I think that's a fine answer, and I'll just kind of say I'm very much looking forward to ruminating on your talk today and thinking about attempting to turn all of this on its head, but for the benefit of just a deeper conversation about it.
Cool.
That's my goal.
Okay.
So we'll see how I do it.
Yes, and I'll be glad to turn the paper over to you so you can digest it again if you want to.
And one final thing coming through here, Chris Profantis says, "Thank you, Victor. I love this whole presentation. I am inspired to learn more about transcendentalism. I too find that transcendent experiences are my connections to God, Spirit, the greater good of the universe."
Yeah. So we are kindred spirits, Chris. I'm glad to know that. See, there are transcendentalists everywhere. We're invading. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for participating. We will extinguish this chalice now. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again, including until we are together again, not just virtually, but with a physical presence. And with that, I want to invite everybody to please join the fellowship time on Zoom. Just click on the link there.
Great.
And you can have all of this,
Okay.
and whatever part of it is useful to you.